Okay, so in this video, I want to talk a little bit about how you can use standard deviations in CODAP. So I'm not going to really talk much about how a standard deviation is calculated, but what I am going to talk about is what a standard deviation means and how it can be useful to you. So let's say that we're trying to find out for a certain community that we're looking at. We were looking at West Oakland and comparing it to North Oakland. Let's say you want to ask yourself, is the asthma rate in this community, does this fall within sort of a typical range, or is this not typical? And the reason you might be interested in asking that question is, let's say that you know that a community is above average in terms of its asthma rate. But you want to say, well, how far above average is it? Is this something we should be worried about? Is this a problem that we can actually solve? Or is it so little away from the average that we might say, well, that's just because there's always going to be a little bit of variation from one community to another. But if you really want to find out if something's going on, either to cause asthma rates to be exceptionally low or something's going on that's causing asthma rates to be exceptionally high, it can actually be useful to use a standard deviation. So let me show what that looks like in CODAP. So here, we're going to click again on the ruler. We can put back in our mean, and just like we saw last, I think I actually selected a different community than I intended by mistake. We'll fix that in a second. But you can see the mean falls right here. The mean again is about 49. And then let me actually just make sure I've selected the right. Oh, I see. I selected a different community than what I intended. I meant to click West Oakland here. So now we see the two communities that we compared earlier. We see North Oakland here. We see West Oakland here. And now let's say we want to look and see, do these communities fall within or outside of the standard deviation? So I'm going to click here again. I'm going to add in a standard deviation. And what's important is that standard deviation captures about 70% of all of the data points. And so by definition, what a standard deviation is it captures 68%. We can just round it and call it 70%. So basically 7 out of 10 communities in the East Bay fall within this range of asthma. So we can say actually that if your asthma rate, do we get an actual number here? If your asthma rate, we can just estimate it. If your asthma rate is, say, between 18 and 85, let's say, we can say that's within the standard deviation. But if you want to say what's going on with communities that have an exceptionally low asthma rate, we might look to these communities that are outside the standard deviation. Los Altos, Palo Alto, Moraga. And you could say, what do these communities have in common that's causing their asthma rates to be so low? And on the other hand, you can look to the other side of the standard deviation. And you can find these communities here, and you can say, what's causing these asthma rates to be so high? And so that's part of what a standard deviation can be useful for. It's not only the mean that tells you whether a community has below or above average asthma rates, but it actually tells you, does it fall within, a certain range that we can consider to be typical, or does it actually fall outside of that range? So that's a little bit about standard deviation and how you might be interested in using it in your own data stories.